So with all the films that I make on Academy where I'm using Flash as the dominant kind of light source, it might surprise you that in fact my favorite kind of lighting is natural light no matter what. In fact, I created a expression for photographers who used to work for me, which was natural light before reflector, reflector before flash, flash as a last resort. That was predominantly for portraiture and wedding photography and things really. I thought we'd kind of take a look back at this kind of series of images. It's shot in a kind of a one room. It's got a big window on the left-hand side. And basically it's kind of funky interior, but this is just really about the lighting kind of coming through. It's a good one to demonstrate with as well because it's shot on a kind of a winterish day, so the light tends to be a little bit bluer, but it can also mean that interior lighting can basically become more dominant within the actual image itself and things really. So as far as the window's concerned, really what I'm kind of then looking at is where I'm going to place my subject, and I'll pretty much always get them as close to the window source as I can. But when I'm photographing a female, as a rule of thumb, I will always get them to turn their body away from the light and not into the light like we're seeing here. This, by turning the subject in towards the light source, it tends to actually flatten the body. And if they're heavier, it'll fatten them as well. So not so bad with Rachel here. She looks amazing. But again, what the natural light falling onto the bust, it's flattening down the figure because it's lacking the shadow that we really need. Whereas if it was me there, especially in black against the white wall, I'm going to look like a baby hippo. So as far as the lighting's concerned, though, look at the quality of lighting onto the face here. It's got a great direction of the light because the window is higher. The catch lights are higher within the light. They're actually at our kind of 10 o'clock position as far as the catch light in the eye is concerned. But also the window light is doing its job by lighting the 5 planes of the face, which is the forehead, the chin, the 2 cheeks and the nose. And that's going to kind of, if I keep it in the same place, because that window is fixed, only obviously if it kind of went dark, you know, all of a sudden I just need to ramp up my ISO then. But as far as the kind of the images are concerned, while she stood in the same place, I'm going to be able to work in the same aperture, shutter speed, ISO and so on with it, unless there's a drastic change in light. So this is the kind of the first stage of just turning the body slightly away from the light source. We're using the wall as the kind of the posing prop to kind of just allow her to rotate and lean onto her, basically her left shoulder, but camera right as it were. And just kind of turning that body away from the light will all instantly start to create that shadow, okay, on the bust and actually on the figure and so on with it. When we start to kind of turn the body more away from the light source again, you can see we've got great texture on the dress itself and so on with it. We've got great kind of animation, the shadowing on the flesh and so on with it. So we've got a true highlight running down the arm. We've got the shadow exposed for as well, actually coming down the actual inner part of the shadow arm. And we've got a really great working exposure here. So in fact, the exposure when she was close to the window, I've kept the same exposure there because the hand and the arm at this point is the closest to the light source, and what I don't want to do is burn out kind of any detail. Yes, you can recover information, but I like to kind of shoot as is. I can always add a reflector onto the face, or if I've got to in the post-production, I can lighten it and so on. So the working exposure would have been the same. So where she was in the last image, from the face, the meter would be held there, and that's where it's kind of pointed out. Common sense is, I should say, that because she's not grey, I use a meter instead of kind of just taking an exposure through camera, where it's basically trying to monitor for a grey card and everything else. But I'm trying to get that reflectancy coming off the face. So slightly turning that body. Now, if you imagine every step she moves away from the light is basically decreasing the quality of light by around about a stop. That's kind of a working rule. So even before I take my meter out to kind of meter from the face towards the light source here, I'm expecting around about a 1.5 to 2 stop difference in exposure. So let's say she was f8 by the window, we'd now be at basically closer to f4 by the time she sat on the sofa. The quality of light is really good though, and the reason being for that is because she's lower down again. So in fact, what we've done is raise the light source. So if you've got a fixed aperture, or if the light can only come from a certain position, then obviously you can change the height of the light by kind of repositioning the subject to either lower or higher position, depends on the kind of look that you want. But as a kind of a working rule, I want the catch light, so that's the little kind of white dot in the eye, to either be coming from the 10 o'clock position or the 2 o'clock position, okay? In this case, she's looking towards camera position. The light is coming in from camera left, so in her eye, I would see a catch light if she looked at me at around about the 10 o'clock position, if not a little bit higher because she's now sat down. What I'm trying to do is actually drop the angle of light to create more shadow. Okay, so in other words, as she gets down lower, I create a greater diagonal to the light, and it means that the shadow is guaranteed to be pushed down. So as a perfect rule, again, if we can, let's try and get the shadow from the nose to the actual lip. And this gives us our kind of great kind of quality of light and everything else with it. So the working environment as far as the light's concerned, not only are we changing the likes of ISO, if I want to keep the same aperture and working shutter speed, you know, I'm an old bloke, I do shake more than I used to when I was a young bloke, as far as the kind of how fast I can or how slow I can hold a camera for. So I still like to work on about 125th of a second now, whereas once upon a time I could hold down to a 15th without any trouble, just handheld. Obviously, as I get older now, I'm probably going to need to move into a monopod or a tripod more, even working on location. So for me to maintain my working aperture and my working shutter speed, what I'll just do there is to increase the ISO to match the actual kind of triangle of exposure. Remember that triangle exposure is shutter speed, the aperture and the ISO combined. So if I want to fix two of those things, shutter speed and aperture, the only thing that can change is ISO. If I need to fix ISO, then either I've got to actually change shutter speed or I've got to change aperture, whichever that's going to be. If we kind of move in close now, you'll see how good that quality of light is in the face. So she's turning her head slightly towards the window, as you can see here, and that allows us to maintain this beautiful quality of light, the lighting on the forehead and the two cheeks, and obviously the nose. Let's not forget the chin as well. It's there. That gives us that three-dimensional look. Okay. Now you can see, as far as the catch light's concerned, it's there in the eye, but now you can also see there's a little secondary dot in the bottom of the eye here, and that is, I've introduced a reflector, and that is to bounce just that little bit of light back into the face to just soften the shadow area up a little bit more. Now the further the reflector is from the subject or from the light source, I'll usually use more of a metallic, kind of a more reflective reflector. If the sun is very, very strong, or I'm working very close to the subject, I can work with the white reflector, so a very, very diffuse one. It's not going to bounce as much light. But what we're trying to do is lift the shadow area, of course. So if I move the camera position now, and we move the head. So in other words, if I move the head to a too extreme position where she's looking out of the window, if I don't move the camera position now, basically I'm going to get a strain in the neck, and it's going to look a little bit odd in the eyes as well as she tries to get around towards me. So move the camera position around a little bit more. If you can though, avoid from putting the reflector on the opposite side to the light source like you see in here. Okay, so you can see the reflector now is just in the lower right hand 4 o'clock position of the eye, and that's a kind of a negative. We created a double catch light, but it's also overfilling the shadow of the face, and it just becomes a little bit flat. Now with somebody like Rachel, you can get away with this because she's got great features and good skin and so on with it, so we can kind of almost flatten out the light more. As you get older in life, you need to actually create more shadow on the face to help the slimming and to obviously help the contours to a point. And then finally, I love to kind of work almost in the window itself, but be careful when you're in the room, the subject is nearer to the light source, i.e. the window, and she looks into the room, okay? Because now you tend to get a little bit more of a split lighting actually onto the face. What we mean by split lighting is if you kind of almost split her in half, you can see there is truly a brighter, lighter area on the left-hand side than there is on the right-hand side. You can usually see the dominant split light, in fact, when you're working with very harsh light like sun or flash, and you've actually got it at either the 3 o'clock position or the 9 o'clock position to the face. And by doing that, you'll basically put no lighting coming around towards here unless it's diffused or there's a softbox put on front and things. So really what we wanted to do is kind of look more along the line of the wall, and you'll see here basically my shoulder is technically leaning against the door, but she's now looking to the outside. So we've got that beautiful illumination again, actually onto the face, hitting those 5 planes again, which kind of gives a good roundness, but good shadow at the same time with it. If I want to kind of show more of the features and I can't use any kind of reflector to kind of bounce any light in, then all I need to do is never get the model to really look at me. So if it's a wedding and I'm working with a bride by a window, yes, I'm going to move closer to the window to do the closer up shots. But really, when I'm shooting the fuller length, I don't want it to look at me at all because the lighting's not going to be as good on the face as I want it to be. And again, it just almost becomes a hang-up to some extent that you can create beautiful lighting onto the face. So why are we not doing that to begin with? So just kind of getting her to look out catches all this beautiful quality of lighting as well with it and things. But, there's lovely kind of environment going on here, so why not use it? And then, whilst you're working in locations, you really want to actually kind of maximize the kind of what you can do in that space. So, I've only shown you a few photographs from that part of the shoot, but near the window, near the sofa, near the pictures, we can even go on the opposite side of the room where we've got this other colourful painting here, and I could have the light behind the camera's position, which would give us a flat light then, which would be a great place to use it again. So when you're using a natural light, and specifically if it's coming from a window, get the subject as close to it as you can. It's a lot better for me if it's more diffused, but I also like sunny days to kind of drench the subject in that hard light as well. But it's always nicer to actually diffuse that light down in some way. So think about closer to the window for the subject position. Always meter from the face to the light source, and obviously turn the female slightly away from the light source to enhance the actual 3-dimensional kind of look and feel.